So most QBRs are just a recap, and that's no surprise. The goal is to actually review the quarter that just passed, but the best QBRs basically turn a backwards looking meeting into a forward driving growth engine. Now, in my experience, QBRs are definitely an opportunity to not only learn, but to unlock revenue in more valuable and competitive ways. But that's not always the case. I recently wrote an article titled Five QBR Moves That Prove Marketing is a Growth Engine and Not Just a Cost Center. In this article, I discuss moves that I personally use as a marketer to drive cross functional change, earn trust from the C suite, and stop playing defense in the boardroom. And so my advice includes things like not hiding soft performance, not rushing to execute executive ideas without asking the right questions, presenting KPIs and data that address cross-functional goals or solve cross-functional challenges, bringing opportunities to the table instead of just taking away what everybody else says need to be done, and then also making retention a priority for marketing. And these are things that you don't always see, even though it might sound like, oh yeah, this is common, it makes sense. When you're in those moments, sometimes these things are not evident. And so the ultimate point is to use QBRs to drive strategy and not just summarize performance as a marketer. And so to bring a little bit more depth to this topic and also to show the value of increasing yourself as a strategist in QBRs when you're on the marketing side, I wanted to bring in the money part because ultimately most companies want to drive revenue. And so I have a fractional CFO and an accounting firm founder with me, Doyin Ogunbajo. And I have him here to talk about what's missing for most QBRs from his point of view and what marketing and finance teams tend to overlook. And lastly, how can marketing and finance work together better to help drive competitive growth and just overall better financial health? So, everyone, meet Doyin. Doyin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Spare no details.
No, absolutely, Courtney. And you're right. Like QBR reviews are mostly just summaries. And for us at ASO, we really try to make them very, very forward looking and forward
Mhm.
thinking, you know. So a little bit about me. I'm actually from Nigeria. I was born and raised, and I've been an accountant for 15 years, but I've been running my firm for 2 years now. And we work with very, very like growth thinking like firm owners, you know, and
Mhm.
business owners who are really um not looking to get away from just having a once a year CPA or just a bookkeeper, and really looking for like a finance team that helps them, you know, drive their business to in the direction that they're trying to go to, right?
Mhm.
I think that's the best way to describe it. So this conversation for me is very, very um it's meaningful because it's based in like the real world like practice of our firm, right? And what we do every day with our clients. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, just to get in, in depth with you on this, Courtney.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with your clients. I'm curious to
Yeah.
know the percentage of your clients that actually already show up with that forward thinking strategy mindset, or how many are you really using these times to just talk about what happened? And you don't find there's a lot of, hey, this happened. So let's try this, or this is informing that. So, what do you think? Is it pretty common in your field? Or are you still having to nudge people into a way where it's not just past data, but it's also present thinking?
Oh, we're still having to nudge people. I would say that there is like two of our clients in particular that I know like they're very, very proactive, like just with how they're thinking ahead, and just thinking forward with their business. One of them in particular, I'm going to share a little bit with you, is a CEO who he's based in Tampa, Florida, and he owns this radiology firm, right? And last year, like just looking at the numbers, he ran a loss. Just overall, he made a loss last year. The profit margins were pretty bad. The numbers weren't looking good, and for us, like we had to take like just speaking about again about strategy, right? So because he's a CFO client, so we're coming in, and for me, my mindset is, you know, I'm looking at this as a firm owner and also as a CFO of that firm, right? So there's kind of like two sides of my brain kind of working here. And so like just one quick policy thing that we made, like just off the bat, was, we realized that there was so much accounts receivable on the books, meaning like money that's, supposed to come in that's been owed for like over 90 days, right? Some for even
Mhm.
6 months, almost $25,000 worth of, money that's out there. And so, of course, we made steps to go collect that money, but also going forward, we're like, hey, you know what? We're going to institute a policy shift. Just going forward, we're going to draft policy that's going to go out to the clients, and that's going to say, hey, you know, we appreciate your business, but these are the guidelines and the terms and conditions going forward as far as like collecting payments. We're going to give them the terms, and if we're still not receiving the payments by that time, then there's extra steps that will be taken, right? Up to the steps of potentially legal, you know, consequences, or just moving to a legal standpoint. And just having all that lined up in that policy documentation, which we drafted up, and he looked at it, he was like, hey, this looks great, right? Um, and one thing that we asked him was like, hey, so how did you actually try to resolve this before? And he has an assistant who, she was like, yeah, we just, we asked him like, hey, can you guys pay us sooner? And I was like, no, you don't ask, you don't ask, right? That's, as a business owner, you tell, you let them know, hey, this is the policy, you know, as of this date, right? Give them some time. We did it as of May 1st. So it's going into place. But going forward, this is the policy. You can work with it, you know, or not. So that's a strategy. It's a change in strategy. It's a very small, slight change in strategy, but it's going to improve the cash flow going forward, right? So that's just one thing that we did. We made some other like just overall changes, but that's kind of like that insight that as a finance team, we bring to the table that Seth, that's our client, Seth and his team, right, really don't have that, and that's what he's looking for. And so he's also looking to really, really grow his business in the next couple of years. And I'll get more into some of the other solutions that we're working on for him. But just to give you an example of that strategy, and that thinking that we kind of help our clients work through.
What I really like about that is when I say forward thinking, I don't just mean, okay, that happened. So what do we do now? I really mean, like, what
Yeah.
are we going to set up that's going to save us time and money and help us to be able to like expedite success in the future long term. And so this isn't just about doing a review and saying who owes us or who hasn't paid or what the problems were. So now we're going
Yeah.
to react. It's about saying, hey, this is a gap, it's causing us this, let's set up a system. And I love that. One of the things that I talked about in an article that I wrote was basically being transparent. Now on the marketing side, sometimes people want to hide data like that because they want whoever's running the company, or whoever the CEO is, to think that they're doing things well. They're trying to tell the good part of the story and conceal the bad part so that they can manage it within their team. But there's so many things that you can solve when you're transparent about what's happening. And instead of being ashamed of it, you can say, hey, this is what we're seeing. Anybody have any ideas? Or this is how it's impacting us. This is what we're thinking. And people can also pour in if they have other resources to help, or if they have a better idea of what can be done. So I love that you took that approach. And I'm sure that's going to
Yeah.
save him plenty of headaches moving forward. And you guys can work to solve other problems.
Yeah, and he can collect his cash sooner, right? That he
Yeah.
deservedly has earned for services provided. And yeah, I just wanted to hit on one last thing you said there, because I think for us, it's like a fundamental, it probably, maybe like marketing is on the go, like maybe just a little bit of a fundamental shift, right? Because I think for us, we're definitely like one word I was thinking about was just exposure, right? You were saying that the marketing teams might try to hide things sometimes, but for us, we believe in like going deep in as much as possible to really, that's the point of analyzing the numbers, right? To figure out, hey, what's really happening here. So exposure is a really, really like key thing for us, being able to expose things and then think through, okay, here's a solution or a potential range of solutions that we can apply to, again, get things moving in the right direction. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, and you know what? I guess I get it. Yeah, your job is to go deep, but especially with you being finance. So maybe if I was talking to someone in sales or product, it would be different. But nobody wants to be the pain in the thorn in your side. Nobody wants for finance to be reporting them as the problem child. And so that's a whole thing. Like, oh, okay, because marketing could be seen as an expense if they're not driving enough ROI, or you can't calculate the attribution model or contribution models aren't able to help you to see how they're contributing to what's going on at the bottom of the funnel, which is really hard for marketing. So I get it when you're doing a lot of demand and awareness work, it may not look like things are happening or contributing directly because it's so hard to calculate exactly how someone entered the system, especially if we're talking like B2C. If it's not a direct transaction, or and it could be the same on B2B too, but it's like they may have interacted with your marketing, but you can't always tell if it was exactly this that triggered or made them say, yes, this is why I'm going to purchase your product. So I love that you're honest with your stuff, but I maybe that's why in some environments where, there are internal politics, people are very shy or secretive when it comes to some of the data, but it still hurts the company, even if it saves the team.
Yeah, it does. And I think you also hit on something there, right? Where you're saying being able to tie the marketing to revenue. And we'll get into this later, I'm sure. But for me, like taking off that CFO side of me for a minute and putting on that like firm owner side, right? Like I can literally, you know, trace like my marketing to revenue, right?
Hmm.
Like marketing steps and tactics that I've made. And I can see like, for example, this client I just discussed, the radiology firm owner. We initially found each other on LinkedIn where, I got his email and he was in my mailing list, right? From being on my email newsletter, which I send once a week, which I'm actually not consistent with, by the way, which is why I'm hiring a head of marketing.
Ah,
But he would see my emails once a week, and then when in one of these emails I said, hey, you know what, I'm actually having a virtual event where we talk about cash flow, and he was one of the participants in that event. There was about 8 people that attended. This was late last summer, and from there, he just saw another email and then booked a call. And then the sales side of me kicks in, right, as that firm owner, where I'm, then, we have the discovery call and, have the proposal engagement letter, and, he becomes a client. But I can literally trace that, this is no dollar spent, like, right, like minimal dollars. I mean, on the LinkedIn subscription and the email platform and that kind of thing. But, I can trace those marketing efforts that actually translated literally to revenue with some sales in there, right? So for me, it's a little bit different where I really value that, what marketing brings, and what it actually means, like creating a market for your firm. So yeah, that's definitely why I'm hiring that head of marketing, and we can definitely talk about that. Yeah.
I love that. And do you think that you see it better now, what marketing can produce or information that's valuable to them because you are a firm owner and you do fractional CFO work? Is it like easier to spot now than it was when you were working for one of your, because I think you worked, correct me if I'm wrong, you worked for maybe one or two of the big five accounting firms? So when
Big
you
Four
were
accounting firm.
there, oh, Big Four, sorry. When you were there, did you realize which levers marketing could pull? I mean, which data was important to marketing?
Yeah, and no, I think I definitely got exposure to some of that sales side, but not really the marketing side. So the sales side meaning like I would, be on teams that was helping draft proposals, right? That was going out to like major like government agencies and like nonprofit agencies to try to win work. But I really didn't see that marketing side until I stepped out and kind of got into my own role as a firm owner, right? On a smaller level, but still, like, for example, a firm like Ernst& Young that I worked at, like, they have a brand, right? Like EY. Whenever I mention EY to anybody, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and,
Mhm.
there's the logo is ubiquitous. So, there is that value of the marketing that's always there and just kind of underlying, that kind of also you can trace that to that sales part, right? Which I was exposed to a little bit. But I think on the small firm side, which I'm more in now, like I can definitely more like do like a linear trace, right? Of like the marketing to the sales to revenue. I that's it's easier for me to trace it that way.
I love that. And I also think it also shows how sometimes we're in our silos and when you don't have enough access, even though the company or the team may be bigger, so ideally it should be easier. It's not always easier. But now that you have a smaller team and a more like condensed view, you can see directly what's impacting your revenue. So now that you know better, I would say for someone whether you worked inside of a company or you were leading a company, what do you now know that as far as signals, what signals do you now know that other departments often overlook but could be really valuable when it comes to informing their strategies?
So yeah, like kind of like what I was talking about earlier, that example with that accounts receivable signal that we noticed. Things like delayed customer payments or even like tax liabilities that are um just lagging there. They can offer like insights into like the overall like operational and or marketing performance, right? So with that client that we're talking about, that I was talking about, that owns a radiology firm. Another thing that we did is, with him, developed and revamped his whole pricing, structure, right? So now he has like different services that he offers, and they're at different tiers, but for each tier there's like a minimum kind of like payment that's going to be recurring, that's going to be always coming in, which gives him a little bit more, just a lot more cushion as far as like recurring revenue and that cash flow, right? um and so for him also, you know we're also making like just more like strategic shifts to like the underlying like financial reporting, where right now like his old accountant was just doing his bookkeeping and not really talking about any of this what we're talking
Mm.
about now, right? But for him, we're looking more at like the cost of sales, and we're trying to break that down into like, hey, for each of these like services that you're offering, what's the customer profitability, for each of those segments, right? What's more profitable, meaning when you're seeing what's more profitable and what's bringing in more cash overall, you can then focus more of your marketing dollars on that, right? It just gives you more insight into, hey, what's working, what's not, what should we tweak. So that's just more of the other things that we're working through with him. And all of this really is going to improve cash flow. It's going to improve profit margins, and it's going to give just that overall like confidence that the business is moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's really good. And it goes into my next question. So you mentioned improving profit margins. And a part of that, when we're talking about an entire program, or let's just say a product portfolio, a part of that is also the money that goes out to acquire those new customers, right? And a lot of that activity comes from marketing, so not just sales. What would you say is a green profit margin flag when you're seeing marketing activity do X? You're like, let's either double down, or what's the red flag that would make you say, let's pull back, something is off. We need to reconsider how we move forward.
Yeah, I would say for the revenue for a green flag, right? And the marketing, I would say when we're seeing that, you know, when we're able to tie the marketing directly, of course, with sales, directly to revenue generation, um, at a rate that, is at or above the target that we've set, right? So, for example, let's say, we set a marketing, we set our budget for marketing at overall spend of 25%, but we want to make sure that, hey, we want to see X ROI on this spend. Um, being able to like for this client, being able to like see that and break that down, um, it makes it easier for us to say, hey, if we're hitting our targets, yes, that's a green light for us to keep moving forward and maybe double down on what's working. So for this client that wants to see like customer profitability by segment, we're able to like really see what's actually profitable, which is for us, giving us that green light, right? It's these are green flags. If we're able to see like this service is at or below, at or above, sorry, the target that we've agreed upon with the clients, which is how we kind of work with our clients when we onboard is, we work with them to, overall they'll think of like just strategic like goals that they want, but we then, develop like financial metrics and goals and like indicators that drive, those strategic goals, right? So that they're all both kind of working together. So that's kind of how we approach that.
That makes sense. But then here's the tricky part. So,
Yeah.
what happens if we have not met our revenue goals? And now we're trying to figure out, well, how can we rush to meet our revenue goals for the quarter, which we will see a lot of companies come under fire for gaps that need to be filled. And then there are times when they're like, yeah, we're already at max marketing budget for the month, but we really need to meet this goal. So let's spend more. Spending more can sometimes throw off your profit margins, even if you meet your revenue goals. How do you, as a CFO, a fractional CFO, or a finance leader, determine, you know what, right now, the priority is this? Like, how do you choose? Yeah, we could reach our revenue goal if we spend more. It may throw our profits off now, but could that be better for the long term? Like, what questions do you ask before people make those type of decisions?
Yeah, I'm thinking about a lot of things. I'm thinking about like the overall like health of the company at the time, which, I'll be able to see like just looking at the balance sheet and just um seeing how, things are looking like the cash flow, right? How much cash do we have, you know, now? Like, and looking forward, like say for the next like 13 weeks, right? We usually do a cash flow forecast for that long anyway. So just looking at that like the next 13 weeks and seeing like, hey, even if we, throw this amount, extra into marketing now for something that we know we should get a very good return on, even if it's extra funds, right? Do we still have enough to pay the bills, pay our staff, take some out for ourselves, whatever we need to in the meantime? Those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about, at least from a finance perspective. Because it's always good to, have enough cash flow and positive cash flow to be able to invest in marketing that works, but you
Mhm.
want to be doing that in a sustainable manner, right? Which is very, very key. And in a manner that's reasonable ultimately. Yeah.
Okay. So what type of
Yeah.
momentum would you have to see for you to be able to, for you to say this is actually reasonable? Yes, we might be in the negative, in the red for a little bit, but the momentum is driving makes me believe this is going to be better long term, even if you won't see it for the next couple of months or the next couple of quarters.
Oh, you know what? Giving you a real life example, right? So with this client that owns this radiology firm, right now he's in a lot of discussions with like multiple like um hospital chains, like hospital groups, in Florida. So that's a good sign for us. That's actually one thing that when I was talking about like key performance indicators like KPIs that we track, they're not all financial. Some of them are like non-financial KPIs. So for Seth, one of the things that we track is like, hey, number of contracts that you know we're in discussion with. How many of those contracts actually lead to actual proposals and lead to actual signed contracts? So right now we know that Seth and his team are, he's talking to a lot of people, and a lot of those are in advanced stages. So that's a good sign for us as his finance team, because we know there's going to be, some of the marketing that he's been working on, you know, lately has been working, right? So we know that there's going to be revenue coming down the line, down the pipeline. So that's a green flag for us. That's a good one of those like good signs that we can, feel good about maybe investing more in that marketing if the
Hmm.
cash flow allows for it, right?
Right.
Because we can tell, hey, what we're doing right now is working. Let's double down a little bit more on that if we can. Yeah.
I like that. Because other things I think about too is maybe the marketing isn't driving the revenue now, but based on the momentum, eventually, maybe it could be a pricing conversation. Maybe the price could make up the gap. And we know with the momentum, that'll bring us into profitability. So it's not necessarily lessening the marketing spend. Maybe it's increasing something elsewhere. Or what can we reduce on the product, like the product development side or things like that. So I definitely think it's a good, healthy mix because when you are seeing momentum, you don't necessarily want to slow it down from a marketing side, but you do have to be completely aware of the financial health of the company. So that makes complete sense. Okay. So another question. What data do you look at all the time that no one asks about, but you believe is key to growth? So like maybe marketing or sales, when you see the QBR templates, and that's the thing, it's really a formality, and there are a lot of templates where people are providing the same data over and over again. And unless someone has it in them to be bold, you don't really see people straight like get innovative in the QBRs. They're like, this is what they expect, this is what they want to see. And I've had it before where I've added in extra data and they're like, no, they don't want to see that. But the way that I told the story, they ended up asking those questions, or a different team, let's say sales or product, were talking about something, and I could use that data to help identify how we could problem solve moving forward. So that was great, but only I knew what data could be helpful, but it was outside of what was expected of me. So what data do people not ask about or is not expected to come from the finance team that you think could be completely like valuable in a unique way?
No, absolutely. I'll list two, right? One I would say is more and they're both like one is from my CEO side of things, and the other one's like that CFO side, right? So the CEO one is, as the CEO of my firm, like is that like long the LTV to CAC ratio, right? Like the customer acquisition costs, and just just having that and being able to compare that to the potential long-term value of that client that I'm acquiring. Because I think for me, like in the accounting space, an accounting client, on average, you can expect to be with for around like 7 years, right? For us, like we want it to be longer than that. We want to be our clients to be with us until they either sell their companies or retire, or something happens there, right? So, I'm always thinking, long term, and like that value, compared to like the cost of acquiring those clients. And it's something that I've seen a couple of other, like, forward thinking firm owners like me think about too. But it's not something that's very, very, really much talked about in the accounting space. Now the other side, the other, I think, uh, um, sorry, was it KPI, right? The KPI that I look at,
Mhm.
is, and this one is more well known, but it's very hard to, figure it out and really understand it, is cash flow, right? Now it's like ubiquitous. Everyone knows how important cash flow is, but they don't really know what goes into it, and how it's calculated, how it can be used as a tool to really, you know, um, grow your business, if you're looking to do that, right? Which most of us are. But how you can use that to just give yourself peace of mind and really just give yourself insight into what it takes to drive your business and move it in a direction that you need it to. So with our clients, like we really make sure that it's literally, at our dashboard, like that we work through them every month, one of them anyway. Like at the bottom there, it's like the forecasted cash, that we go through, month by month, right? Just based on all the activity that, is happening, throughout that period. So, for us, one of our clients, that owns a pet grooming store in Northern Virginia, she wants to, in the next 3 years, open two more locations, right? So, the cash in hand, along with other, like, just KPIs and indicators like, debt to cash and debt to asset and things like that, that indicate the health of the firm. But really, that cash is really, is really going to be important when we're going to be talking to lenders, right? And our finance, us as a finance team will have to be able to just, keep those guys at ease that, hey, you know what, when it's time to expand, we have, the cash and the wherewithal to do this in a sustainable manner, just to grow that, to grow that company. So those are really like the kind of things that, I think about, most often with my firm and my clients.
Okay, so now I have a question about cash flow. How
Yeah.
often are you reporting on it, or do your clients want to hear about it? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? If people aren't thinking about expanding, are they actively asking questions or expecting you to deliver it? When you present it, do people care immediately? And I'm curious to know if there's a difference between the clients you have a part of your own firm, or the clients that you had when you were working for one of the big four?
Yeah. So definitely the clients that we have now, it depends. Our CFO clients are very, 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 very particular about cash flow. So, I think in the time that we've worked with them, they've just, it's something that it was a problem for them to begin with. So that's part of why they came to us, right? So for them, they always, it's not even something we have to point out, but it's something that they always look at, So, for some of our just what you might call our bookkeeping clients, they're not who are not at that stage yet where it's something that's important for them. We're just doing their accounting. And it might be on a monthly basis, right? Or at a quarterly basis. But for those high level clients, the CFO clients, they're paying attention to the cash flow at least monthly, but some of them are going into the dashboards to, multiple times within a month to check on things, ask us questions, but they're really, really on top of that, because they're more like, in tune with their business just overall.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And then one last question. What does finance, or what do you, as the finance guy, wish that marketing would bring to the table? What do you think is missing that you're either always, I don't want to say a little confused by, but you're like, that's too high level, or we don't know what to do with that, that you wish that they would either help you to work through a little bit more, or that's completely missing?
Yeah, I think just being able to align more, I think just having more of an open mind and being willing to align more around the same goals and not see and I think this has a lot to do with just the corporate culture in general, but not seeing, finance as maybe a penny pincher or somebody who's looking to expose you, or looking to point fingers, or just looking to just say no, no, that kind of thing, right? I think just having more of the collaborative mindset and being open to align really on things on the same, you know uh common interests, right? On shared interests or shared, goals, right? And the more of that can be done, I think, the disagreements and things that you don't agree on can more better be like resolved, or just in some way at least, agree to be disagreed, or something like that, right? But really, I think just having more of a mindset of like aligning on the same kind of metrics and the same goals, I mean, just like I was talking about, like long-term value and CAC, right? If they both recognize how important that is and work together towards that, um, and making sure they maximize that metric, that's just that one metric. I think any business that's, looking to grow will, appreciate the value of, that cross-functional approach between both of them. And so that's, I think that's one thing that I think, just overall both teams could do better on.
Okay, so if you are saying finance isn't just a penny pincher, and you guys don't want to be seen as the grim reaper of all things fun and interesting at work, what can finance do that people don't recognize them for? Like, what can you guys bring to the table that can like invigorate innovation, that makes people say, oh, we can use this to solve a problem? Give us an example.
A lot of things,
Okay.
Courtney. Yeah, I mean, I think finance just helps tell the story, right? We help tell the story of, you know where a business is at a point in time. And with that story, you can decide however you want to go, right? Ultimately, everyone has a goal with their business, whether they want to, pass it down to their kid or, sell it or maybe shut it, ideally not, but shut it down or, but in some way you want to have some kind of economic benefit from what you've put your blood, sweat and tears into. And if you don't value, being able to generate insights into how, not just you, but whoever else is running that business, whether you're selling it, which is usually how things happen. But if they don't know, or if they look at it and they look at this chiropractic firm and they're like, ugh, nobody's going to want to buy that, right? So it's just, you need to have a good finance or at least a good handle or understanding of finance overall, um, if you want to have a growing, thriving, successful business.
That makes a lot of sense. And a good part of my client base would be startups. And, when they're trying to go from pre seed to Series A to Series B or whatever, that finance story, I can definitely see why it would be the most important story. While marketing may help you to, and sales may help you to identify that you are product or market fit. It's ultimately those finances that are going to say, yeah, people may want it, but at this price, and at this rate, it's still not going to be worth investing in. And so making sure that that's a part of the story, that makes complete sense, especially for the clients that I work with. But it's interesting that you said you considered yourself a storyteller in marketing. Even if you go out and look at a lot of marketing jobs, especially if you're on the brand side or content side, storytelling is everywhere. And I can guarantee you that most people have never ever said, man, finance is what tells the story of a company. Nobody. You will probably be the first. I don't know if you're going to be the only, but I think it's interesting that you say that you're a storyteller. So if you think about it like that, and we're thinking about marketing considers themselves storytellers, you consider yourself storyteller. So the story that you guys can bring together is how is what we're saying and what we're attracting and the price point that we're selling it at benefiting the company. And I think
Yeah.
that is a perfect marriage of maybe marketing sales as well as product because they're helping to build out that product or inventory or whoever merchandising if it's on the B2C side or like retail, but working with you to say how is everything that we're doing benefiting the company and what can we invest back into the company to continue pushing it forward. Did I say it
Yeah.
right?
I think no, absolutely, absolutely. I think they're the two like essential, like almost, pillars, right, of that business. And there's, other like, things that fit in there, like sales and operations and human resources and everything else, that makes it a complete, whole. But, without marketing, you're not bringing in revenue. And if you're not managing that revenue right, you're going under. So those two things really are like foundational,
Yeah.
and I completely agree with you with just everything else that you said there. Yeah.
I love that. So now that makes complete sense to me. So now when we're talking about a quarterly business review, so going back to our original thing, how can we tell that story better together? Like, what should we be doing before the QBR? How should we be aligning to make sure that they appear to be a part of the same story and not siloed pieces that get solved differently?
Yeah. I think here I'll probably put on more of like my firm owner hat
Mhm.
because like I said, I'm hiring a head of marketing, right? But right now, like it's like there's two me's. There's the me that, is delivering still the accounting services, and then there's the me that's, doing the marketing for the accounting firm. And so those two people like, work together in a way, right? Like I still like, you know I have like other like firm owners that I, get in touch with, and I always pick their brains about how they're tracking their marketing and, how that's, leading to revenue for their firm. But, you know for me, like that's I think that's key to answer your question is like they just literally have to work together. Like as much as possible, you have to unsilo both teams. And I think a lot of this too is comes down to leadership. Um because in accounting and in business, like, we believe in a top-down approach, right? Like the tone at the top sets the tone for the rest of the firm or the company. So for me, like I believe in like empowering my staff, like, to, you know, be free and speak your mind and go and collaborate as much as possible. So I think that is also very key. Like, whatever tone that the leadership sets is what is going to permeate, throughout the rest of the organization. So that collaborative approach has to come from, that CMO, CFO, possibly the chief revenue officer as well, if there is one. I mean, yeah, they all got to be working together and kind of have that flow down, through the rest of the organization.
You said a lot, and that was on point. When I tell you that, especially because most of my QBR experience has been from the corporate side, whether I was presenting in one, as I became more senior, or preparing the slides for my leaders to present it. And there have been times when I've been told, well, let's not, why are we putting this data point in there? That doesn't tell a good story. And you're like, but it's necessary because it basically suggests that either we need to do some testing or da 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 da. And they did not want to disclose that information. And a lot of the tone was, well, how can we make what we're doing feel good? Like that's basically what it was, right? Feel good to leadership so they can feel good about it. And eventually that came crashing down because finance was like, well, until you guys can prove that this is making us money or it's valuable, I'm freezing your budgets. And then that became a whole swirl of an exercise. And I think that company really taught me and maybe expose me to the fact that, just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you are practicing in a way that's going to benefit the company. That's where I realized that there are a lot of leaders who will parse out information that makes it seem like they're not leading correctly or what their team is doing isn't benefiting the company. And I get it, but if you have the right strategy behind it, this is why I love being a marketing strategist, then you can also point to this is why this was the hypothesis. This is why we thought this was going to work, right? Because marketing is not a perfect science, but it is a science in a sense. This was the hypothesis. This is what supported it. This is what we agreed as a team, including finance and product and sales. We said, hey, this is what we want to do. Where's some feedback? And we use your insights to help refine what we recommended. And if we executed it and it didn't go well, what did go well? What didn't go well? So now what? There's nothing wrong with that to me. There is nothing wrong with that, but it
Always
is an
refining.
unpopular conversation. It is not that popular of a conversation. And I know when there's a lot of pressure, people feel like, well, it's one thing to have that conversation once, but what happens if I'm having that conversation multiple times? And I find the reason that people have to have that conversation a lot is because they're so busy or hide that they need to have that conversation a lot. It's because they're so busy slapping band-aids on it, hoping that they can quickly recover what they lost and get themselves their teams back into a position where it looks like they're only like cranking out wins. And that's just not any business. How many businesses are consistently cranking out wins? So it
Yeah.
should not be a
I mean,
surprise.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, even like publicly traded companies, like when they try to do that, investors and the finance guys can smell through that, right? So how much more like a much smaller organization, like it just it never works. It never works.
Oh, it never does. And then that's when you get in position, speaking of investors, what we saw in tech a couple of years ago, after the great resignation, then came like the great layoffs, basically. I don't know if they were calling it that, but a lot of, I think they were calling them activist investors or shareholders. They were basically saying, we don't like the way that you're running the company. So you need to do this, and that, all the way down to
Yeah.
you need to have teams back in work 3 days, I mean, in the office 3 days a week. You need to cut 10% of the company. You need to do this, you need to do that. And so you're completely right when you say that when you start hiding things and it doesn't make sense. When 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, people start to smell it after a while. And those who are heavily invested, especially financially invested, are going to make sure that their dividends are maximized. And I get that.
Yeah.
I completely get it.
Yeah.
Okay,
As they
perfect.
should.
Okay. Yeah, they should.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. And so I love that perspective that you brought as like a CFO, someone who's also been an employee for a big firm. So you understand how they do it, but also a business owner. I think that's really great. And I really love how you also said when it comes to small businesses that there's some people who are trying to sell, some people who are trying to grow, and some people who are even trying to shut down. But there's a way, and as someone who's worked for a startup that shut down before, you don't want to lose everything. So how you manage your finances, even when you are going out of business, is important. I think that was so good. And that was definitely something that I didn't see coming, but I'm glad that you said that because it got my wheels spinning.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's some people that want to just build to enough, is what they call it. One of my CPAs out there, she calls it just building to what you think is enough and just staying at that level. And that's okay too. It's just our clients that we serve, are looking to grow, right? And not everyone's in that position. So yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I get that. We'll have to talk more about building to enough, and then even what that requires. But hyper growth is always the goal. It makes everybody more money, right? So, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
As me as a marketing strategist and you as a CFO, as well as an accounting firm owner, thank you for your time. And please let everyone know a little bit more about your business, how they can work with you, get in touch with you. You also have a podcast. So take a few minutes and let people know where they can hear more from Doyen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my firm is ASO Financial. We work with, small businesses who have growth-minded ambitions, and they're looking to understand the financial, just things around that and really get their numbers in check. And you can find us at asofinancial.com. As Courtney was saying, I do have a podcast called The Profit Pilot, and we're on Spotify and YouTube. And yeah, Courtney, it was a real pleasure, getting to have this chat today. So
All right.
thanks for having me.
Okay. No problem. Anytime. And I'm sure this won't be our last conversation. So thank you
No.
everyone for joining today. I'm Courtney Taylor, marketing strategist, growth engineer, and founder of the Taylor Collab, a marketing strategy consultancy. I look forward to working with anyone who, similar to Doyen, is in a growth minded space. Either they're trying to scale their business or just revamp things because they're not sure what's going wrong, or they have an idea that they're trying to parse out because they're either entering into a new market or they're bringing on a new product. So any of those things I can help with, and I'm sure Dorian can as well because there are costs that are associated with that. So thank you for your time today. I hope you got something valuable from this, and we will see you next time.